Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Seth and Megan Review Game of Thrones. I'm Seth.
I'm Megan.
We're a little late on this one, we know, but the episode gave Megan some PTSD, so we had to take some time to process our emotions.
Yeah, and I've processed my emotions.
What was this episode called? The Bells.
Is it called The Bells?
Yeah, Season 8, Episode 5, The Bells.
Okay. Yes, so Season 8, Episode 5, one episode left. Had a lot of ground to cover. I think they've rushed this season, I think is kind of where we both are now, is that we feel like this season wasn't given time to breathe.
Right.
What are some of your favorite moments from the episode?
This episode is probably the best directed that I've seen, or at least the best directed I can remember. It's the same guy who did the Battle of Winterfell, but he completely outdoes himself here. My favorite thing about the episode was all the visuals.
Mm-hmm.
It's got imagery as striking and haunting and violently beautiful as any war movie. There's this part towards the end that really sticks out in my memory of Arya covered in soot. And she's bleeding from her head, and the blood is pooled around her eyes, and it just looks like she's wearing some striking gothic makeup, and it's just wonderful.
It is, and for me, there's a lot of just like frames that I've seen all over the internet that I agree with, of like how beautiful they are. There's one of Tyrion as he crosses the threshold into King's Landing, where the massive hole is, and just some of the juxtaposition of characters against the backdrop of the burning city. Yeah, as a lot of people online are talking about the cinematography. It's gorgeous, beautiful, perfection.
As quickly as we can, what happens in this episode?
Daenerys goes crazy.
Daenerys does go crazy. So remember, the last thing happened in the last episode was that the Mountain beheaded Missandei at Queen Cersei's orders. This pushes Daenerys right over the edge.
Yeah, and the beginning of the episode, and this is something I wish that they'd given more to, Daenerys is seen, and she looks like a mad queen. She looks very distressed, and
she looks sick.
Yeah.
Because she is. So they go back to Dragonstone to plan their next attack. We learn that Daenerys has been refusing to see anyone or to take any meals. Jon Snow and the Northerners arrive. Varys relays this information to him. Varys also tells him that he's concerned Daenerys is not well.
Is not fit
to rule the Seven Kingdoms.
And expresses his support instead for Jon.
But Jon continues to claim that he has no interest in it, only wants to serve Dany.
And then so Tyrion is forced at this point to turn Varys in to Daenerys. So this episode was the end of Varys burned alive
by Drogon. Yeah, Daenerys she knows someone has turned against her, so Tyrion and Varys, he's pretty okay with dying for this cause.
He's accepted. Really. This is his fate now.
But before he's executed, we do see that he is writing notes about Jon Snow's true name, his true lineage. So it's implied that he has sent ravens off.
That's what we're speculating.
To the remaining lords of Westeros,
to make sure that everyone knows, in case this goes further with Daenerys' spiral into madness.
So their plan is for Daenerys she's gonna go to Blackwater Bay. She's gonna blow up Euron Greyjoy's fleet
and then destroy all of the scorpions
lining the wall outside King's Landing there. And then now Tyrion wants this to go as well as possible, wants as few casualties as possible. So once Daenerys has taken care of that, bells are supposed to ring inside the city.
Well, that's that's signaling that the King's Landing they've surrendered.
And Tyrion is certain this is going to happen.
Partially because he has made arrangements. Jaime, on his return to King's Landing, is captured by the Northmen, and he wants to.
We got a cat here. He wants to be in the video.
His name's Greyjoy.
Yeah, his name's Greyjoy.
um, and anyway, he wants Jaime to convince Cersei to leave. So he helps Jaime escape, arranges things with Davos to ensure that they can escape, and he wants Jaime to take Cersei and start over in Essos. Jaime agrees to do that and agrees to make sure the bells are rung before he leaves. But, they invade the city. Jaime does not make it to Cersei. The bells ring because they surrender. But in that moment, Daenerys snaps. And she decides to burn King's Landing to the ground.
She becomes her father in this moment, and yes, is indiscriminately murdering innocents and destroying every street, every corner,
every building
of King's Landing,
including the Red Keep, which is like a tremendous visual thing to watch it tumbling to pieces. We get a lot of great moments between characters. When Daenerys is contemplating this moment and she decides to trigger and to go and destroy all of King's Landing, Grey Worm follows her lead, and initially Jon tries to hold the Northmen back as they charge to fight the Lannister soldiers who had just dropped their weapons, who had surrendered. And you see this moment for Jon of realizing what's happening. You get a great moment between Arya and the Hound. You get a great showdown. What do they keep calling it? Clegane Bowl.
Clegane Bowl.
You get Clegane Bowl.
So Arya and the Hound make it to King's Landing, and they make it inside the city before the Lannister soldiers shut everyone out from the innermost part of the city. Jaime doesn't make it in time, so he's got to take the back way around to get to Cersei. But anyway, the Hound and Arya make their way into King's Landing, into the Red Keep, and it's falling down around their ears. And the Hound tells Arya, "You don't want to be like me. You go have something to live for. This is something I have to do.
And if you stay with me, you're gonna die." And yeah, Clegane Bowl is everything I could have wanted and more. The fight between the Mountain and the Hound is fantastic.
And it is absolutely something that the show has been hinting at and building towards since the first season.
Yes, it's fantastic. Qyburn is killed very unceremoniously.
Very ignoble death.
The Mountain just throws him.
Because when the Mountain is confronted with his brother, that's all he wants to do is kill his brother. So he just picks up Qyburn by the neck, I think it is, and throws him against some crumbling rock.
So that was great too. But Clegane Bowl is definitely one of the highlights of the episode. And then a lot of the last chunk of the episode is following Arya. And it's, cutting between Arya and the Hound doing his fight. But Arya would be running through the streets, and then there'd be fire and explosion or crumbling, and I'd be like, and then we'd cut to Clegane, and it'd cut back, and it'd show a building, what, and I'm like, Arya?
It was like she was riding a roller coaster.
I was.
That's how intensely her heart was pounding, the adrenaline she was experiencing. She was speechless. But it is great that we get to see this from Arya's perspective as she tries to flee the city. And
it definitely makes it very clear that Arya's gonna have some thoughts about what just happened. And this was happening, I was like, man, if Daenerys kills Arya, she just killed the person who saved literally everyone because of her indiscriminate murdering of Kingslanders.
The Kinglanders?
Sure.
The cat's trying to eat my feet.
He is. But no, and then, Daenerys is going crazy. So, this is kind of a big sticking point for a lot of fans.
Yes, this is a thorn in a lot of people's craws, I suppose.
I am quite literally of two minds on this. One part of me, Dany's my girl. I've been one of my favorite characters the whole show. I got a tattoo that says Dracarys.
You do?
Big into it, loved Daenerys and everything she stood for. And then with this turn, part of me doesn't want that to be what they did to her character. Part of me has a deep problem with that choice.
Sure. A lot of people still want Daenerys to be
the good guy.
The hero figure. But the thing is, I don't think she was ever... I never thought she was really gonna be. I don't think it's out of character at all for Daenerys to become the villain. But what is wrong is how it's done. It's, when season 6 concluded, there should have been 20 more episodes awaiting us instead of what, 13 something. Yeah.
But yeah, my second mind is, like you mentioned, like there's been evidence. I mean, nothing like shining big red light evidence, but there's been evidence the entire show that
it's been hinted at.
She's not entirely
in the first
good.
season. She watches almost gleefully as Khal Drogo pours molten gold on her brother's head to kill him.
At other points, she has no real qualms. Now, granted, the masters, the slavers were all bad people, but has no real problem with just, crucifying them.
Right, and she always, she's never shied away from murder, but until now, she always chose carefully who she murdered, except for maybe the Tarleys.
Yes, and the Tarleys is another one a lot of people will point to. That in that moment, she was too hard.
If we had had more episodes of watching Daenerys get pushed over the edge, I don't... Okay, so maybe some people still have an issue with it because they really just want Daenerys to be the hero. But if we had more time to watch this build-up play on screen, I think fewer people for sure would care.
But I think there's enough here that you can't write it off as bad writing.
No.
Rushed writing, sure. Bad, no.
No, it's
because
not bad.
You had, repeated failures of Tyrion. You had 2 of her dragons dying. You had Missandei's murder. You had Jorah's death. So much has gone so wrong for her.
She's jealous of Jon Snow,
She's not
lover,
popular.
her nephew.
Jon doesn't love her back the way she wants him to because of the truth of their relationship. And I just think it's been too much. It's been too much for someone who has to fight against those tendencies already.
I think in the last episode, Dany will offer some kind of explanation. She'll give her feelings. She'll find some way to try to justify.
And I think it'll be mostly as, and someone I saw pointed out that when they were calling for the new citizens were pleading for the bells to be rung, they still referred to Cersei as the queen. So even in that moment of her conquest, her victory, she still wasn't the queen. Cersei was still the queen in their eyes. So I think it could be that she's going to justify as they were all traitors.
I think it would have worked just a little better had the bells not been rung and had it been obvious that Daenerys and her army were going to win, but Cersei still refused to surrender. And then in that moment, Daenerys would have just gone off to exact revenge.
Yeah.
And then just got carried away with it. Okay, hold on. I think we need to check the oven.
Yes. All right.
Yep, nothing's burning down. Anyway, Cersei dies in this episode, so I guess we better talk about that.
And Jaime.
Yeah, they die together.
They make an effort to make Cersei a little more sympathetic in her last moments. I still don't find her too sympathetic because I really feel like she dug her own grave.
She did.
With Daenerys. She never once, as we mentioned, considered the possibility that she wouldn't win.
No, Cersei had every assurance that she was going to win this.
And even as she was losing, for a while, she wasn't convinced she was losing.
No, I don't think she could just let herself accept it. She was incredibly vain, and as pointed out by a couple characters in seasons prior, Cersei was never that bright.
Yeah, she often makes... Yeah, she's self-absorbed. She makes selfish decisions. She doesn't really consider the impact of her actions.
Oh, but Jaime... So Jaime can't get into the inner part of the city, so he has to go around the back way, down from the beach, and then there's this tunnel that'll lead right up to the Red Keep. On his way, he's stopped by Euron Greyjoy, and they have what I thought was a completely unnecessary fight. I think we could have just easily accepted that Euron died when Daenerys blew up his whole fleet. That would have been fine.
Yeah, and I think your issue with that is deeply rooted in your dislike of the character of Euron Greyjoy.
I just think Euron Greyjoy is a very one-note, uninteresting character for Game of Thrones. They never did much with him. But just to give him this fight with Jaime.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just thought it was really unnecessary.
But yeah, and then that's another example of a really good moment between Cersei and Jaime in their final moments together. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very powerful moment.
They try to get out the way Jaime just came, but Daenerys keeps bringing down the Red Keep around their ears, and all the tunnels are blocked off with rubble. And Cersei, she's crying and she's frightened, and Jaime just wants to hold her and have her look at him, and they just hold each other as the whole cave they're in collapses.
Mm-hmm. It's a great moment. But overall, the episode was really well made. It's really well shot.
I thought it was a good episode.
And I really think it sets up for a very interesting final episode.
Now, I have no idea if it's at all possible to wrap up Game of Thrones in only one more hour.
Yeah,
Or an hour and a half.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I feel very strongly now that Daenerys may not make it out of the season alive.
No, because what I think is likely to happen in the last episode. Now, I have repeatedly been very bad at predicting these scripts.
It's so hard.
But Daenerys is gonna try to find some way to justify what she did. She's gonna crown herself queen, and then Jon Snow is gonna have to step forth and beg her to step down because he cannot let her rule. Much like his uncle before him, he's an honest man to the last. Sometimes, well, it literally got him killed once.
Mm-hmm.
And Daenerys is gonna refuse to step down, and Jon's gonna have to kill her.
I don't think Jon's gonna kill her. And she may make it out of the season alive.
I figure it's one or the other. It's either Daenerys or Jon that makes it out of the show alive.
I could see a possibility in which they make it out, both of them make it out alive, or maybe Daenerys is not executed, but is either exiled back to Essos, or is, put in the dungeons, essentially.
What's left?
Well, I see not only Jon becoming the new king, but I see Winterfell becoming the new seat of the king.
Well, there's no King's Landing left.
Exactly. And Winterfell has become such a integral part of the story, and it really symbolizes Jon's identity as both Targaryen and Stark, for him to become the king through his Targaryen bloodline and take the capital to the north. And that would also build, obviously, a very deep bond with the north, which has often been one of the key resistors to the crown's rule.
I definitely recognize that there are legitimate criticisms you can levy against this season.
For sure.
But it really does seem like, from my perspective, that some people have gone out of their way to hate this last season.
I kind of like sometimes people go out of their way to hate new Star Wars.
Well, it's edgy to hate things. You get more clicks that way, I guess. But I don't know. As I said in our last video, I've always liked Game of Thrones. She's always been the bigger fan.
Mm-hmm.
This last season is still Game of Thrones to me.
Yeah.
It's not as good as season 3. Nothing will top season 3 of Game of Thrones, at least not for a long time. But it's still one of the best shows on TV.
Yes, and that's something I mentioned, that, people criticize Game of Thrones, but even in its most criticized, its worst moments, Game of Thrones is still better than most other television.
Well, not BoJack Horseman.
I said most. But no, I really think this season will probably always feel a little off compared to all the others, probably due in part because it's only 6 episodes.
Right, and even if it were 10, even if season 7 and 8 gave us 20 more episodes, we've talked about this off camera. No matter what, I think these last 2 seasons would have suffered from what's sometimes called Act 3 syndrome, where even in the best told stories, you've got the first act that sets it all up, and you've got the second act that's all the drama, and then at the end there's nothing left to do but resolve it all.
Yeah.
And so the season 6 finale essentially closed the curtain on Game of Thrones' second act. And so even with 20 more episodes left, it still wouldn't have compared. I mean, remember when Joffrey was a character? That was the best.
And then another important thing to think about with this season and the last season is think about the Battle of Winterfell episode. If this was a normal 10-episode season, that would have been a 2-parter. Could you imagine having to find somewhere to cut that episode in half? Finding somewhere that felt appropriate or felt like it didn't break all the tension. Part of the reason the episode works so well and why it's so great is because it keeps you in such a high level of suspense from beginning to end. And if you have to cut the episode in half and kind of give people a week to dwell on that and then start back up, that's a big challenge.
If the Battle of Winterfell were a 2-parter, though, that would have been the cliffhanger of the century.
Yeah, but at some point, a cliffhanger is not ideal for storytelling. So I can kind of understand where their thought process was with the decision to make fewer episodes. But they also could have just made this 10 episodes just really long episodes. It's not like Game of Thrones fan wouldn't sit and watch them.
It was an interesting decision. I don't know. I guess they just didn't want to make 20 more.
And I did read somewhere that they decided a while ago that they felt 73 hours was the appropriate length to tell the story. And that's close to where they were targeting. But no matter what, Game of Thrones is an excellent show. Even in its moments of maybe questionable decisions. Mm-hmm. I still have issue with Jaime's character development. Even in those moments of questionable decisions for many fans, the show is still excellent. I'm so excited and nervous to see what the final ever episode. I shouldn't say ever. There's going to be more of Game of Thrones, just not these characters, not this story.
A prequel series.
I'm still very interested in that, though.
How many people are canceling their HBO subscription next week now that Game of Thrones is over?
So many. And won't pick it back up until the prequel series happens. But I think no matter what happens next week, I will still be happy with Game of Thrones. But I cannot wait to be able to read all of it again, essentially, and see those deeper character developments, because books inherently have more freedom in their storytelling. So I think, and people will say, and they won't be wrong, that the books will be better. They're probably not going to be wrong, but that doesn't mean the show is not good.
Right.
Any last thoughts?
Next Sunday can't get here fast enough.
I don't know. I have such mixed feelings about the end. Well, we'll be back next Sunday to talk about it as we wrap up. And hopefully we're going to start developing some new content for this channel and come up with a final name.
Yes, next Sunday will probably be our last Game of Thrones video, at least for a time. And it'll conclude what we'll call these trial run videos we've done.
Yeah, and we will come up with some new content. So if you like what you heard or are interested in seeing more, be sure to like and subscribe and keep checking back for new.
And leave us comments. Tell us all your thoughts about these episodes of Game of Thrones.
I want to hear what you thought about Daenerys' character development.
Megan would love to discuss Game of Thrones with just about anyone.
I would. I spent all day at work on Mondays going, no one here watches Game of Thrones. I don't have anyone to talk to. But yeah, so thanks for watching. I'm Megan.
I'm Seth.
And good night.